In other news, Amazon announcing yesterday will ban the police use of its facial recognition technology for 1 year. This move comes just days after IBM announced an end to its facial recognition business entirely. The controversial facial recognition technology has been criticized for inherent racial and gender bias, as well as concerns over its use for mass surveillance. Now, adding fuel to the fire, President Trump retweeting his acting director of the U.S. National Intelligence, Richard Grenell, this morning, calling for these companies to now be barred from getting federal contracts. All right, let's discuss. Joining me now is Mark Douglas, CEO and founder of STEELHOUSE and friend of the show, of course. Mark, thank you so much for being here. All right, let's start with the idea that these big tech companies are now barred from federal contracts. Is that even possible?
I don't think that's possible. So, I mean, of course, Donald Trump, that's a perspective that he's likely to take. But, contracts with the federal government, it's highly regulated. There's a lot of processes, obviously, a lot of agencies involved. So I don't think that's a material issue. But, it adds fuel to the fire for sure.
Absolutely. And with big tech backing away from facial recognition, you actually said that it will create more investment in the technology. Can you explain why?
Yeah, so I've had multiple startups. I have a pretty successful tech-funded tech company right now. I deal with venture capitalists all the time. If you take out these big companies, it leaves a void that venture capitalists are going to fill. And so I think you likely see more companies getting funded. And when you hear names like IBM and Amazon, they sound like huge companies, but the reality is you're talking like 100 people in a division. Amazon, that's a relatively modest sized startup. So, you're going to have venture capitalists rush in and fill that void, and you're likely to get more investment in the sector, not less investment. So, that's why that'll occur.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, Mark. I don't have to tell you how many doubts there are about this technology and the ability to rely on it. It's one thing if you pick up our iPhones to unlock it, completely different if we use it against someone in a court of law, right? That's a lot of the controversy. What do we need from this technology, Mark, for it to become more reliable?
Yeah, so I think one thing is that we're talking I think, primarily in the context of use by the police. I mean, everyone wants substantially reduced use of force by the police. And so obviously training is a big part of that, but one big thing that's part of that is making it easier for them to know when they're threatened. So I think, there's a way to use this technology to benefit police, benefit society. People use facial recognition technology every day. If you have an iPhone, any relatively recent iPhone, you're using facial recognition technology literally every time you pick up your phone. So the technology is not inherently bad. The key is to use it for good. And I think that's what everyone wants, and to use it in a context that's not overreaching by police forces or any part of our government for that matter.
Sure. Let's go back to Amazon here, Mark. Specifically, they're saying they're suspending their use of facial recognition to allow Congress time to regulate this kind of technology. What kind of regulation do we need?
I think what we need is, essentially facial recognition can kind of be considered illegal search and seizure in some sense if you take that very broadly. So essentially, for the police to kind of come in my home, things like that. Obviously, everyone knows there are a lot of laws in there, but essentially now when I leave the house, or use any technology, there can be facial recognition technology involved. So I think, there's just an updating of what data is appropriate for the government to use, when it can be used, how it can be gathered, and facial recognition is, a big part of that, and it's a very fast-growing part of that. And so that's, it's a complex question. It's going to take a lot of thought, a lot of communication to figure out what are the right laws to regulate it appropriately.
I'm so curious, with these huge tech companies like Amazon, Microsoft, IBM essentially stepping away from facial technology, do you think this is a huge loss of income for these companies?
No, it's not. I mean, it's not at that level yet for them. Amazon, the AWS division, has ready-to-use technology that's available. There could be some slight movement of customers away from AWS to any of their competitors that provide something similar. But for the most part, this is not like a huge source of income for these companies at the scale that they operate at.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. Friend of the show, Mark Douglas, founder and CEO of STEELHOUSE. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, Mark.